So we're going to talk about the blood flow within the heart, as well as the blood flow to the lungs and to the rest of the body tissue. So let's trace the blood as it enters the heart. So you have the superior vena cava here, and it will be receiving blood from the upper parts of the body. So I'm going to show the arrow going in this way into the heart. The inferior vena cava will be receiving blood from the lower part of the body, and it actually will be draining into the right atrium right here. So I'm using the blue marker here to indicate that the blood is deoxygenated. So because it just came from the body, it is now returning back to the heart, and the oxygen has been mostly used up by the body tissues or body cells. So the blood goes from the lower parts of the body through the inferior vena cava, and from the upper part of the body through the superior vena cava, and it enters the right atrium. It goes through the tricuspid valve and it goes into the right ventricle. Now, once it's inside the heart, the right ventricle here, which is the bottom part of the heart, is the most muscular part of the heart. It will then pump the blood out of the heart through the pulmonary valve and out of the heart into the lungs. The lungs then will bring the oxygen into the blood. So this will now contain oxygen, and it will enter the heart through the pulmonary veins. So we talked about the arteries as the blood vessel that carries the oxygen-rich blood. However, the pulmonary artery is an exception. Pulmonary artery is the only artery in the body that actually carries deoxygenated blood. So even though it carries the blood away, artery away from the heart, it is actually carrying the deoxygenated blood, and it has to go into the lungs to pick up the oxygen. Once the blood has picked up oxygen from the lungs, it will now return to the heart through the pulmonary veins. It will enter the left atrium. So now it contains oxygen-rich blood, and from the left atrium, it will go through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, which is the most muscular part of the heart, actually the left ventricle, and then it will then have to go through the aortic valve and out the aorta. So this is the aorta here, and it will then go into the rest of the body cells. Once it gets into the body cells will pick up the oxygen, and here's a descending aorta here, go into the lower parts of the body. It will then deliver the oxygen and the nutrients to the rest of the body cells, and it will, once the cells pick up the oxygen, it will then bring the CO2 back into the heart through the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava, and the cycle repeats itself. I'm going to give you a simplified diagram here with my own diagram, and I'm going to draw the heart as if it is a machine. It is the most efficient machine. So I'm going to just simplify the diagram here. So you have the heart, which is two pumps, and this is the septum or the intraventricular septum that allows complete separation of the right side of the heart from the left side of the heart. So we are going to put the the four chambers of the heart here. So here's the separation here. You got the right atrium here, right atrium, and this is the right ventricle. This is the left atrium, and this is the left ventricle. This is the septum here, S. So we're going to start with and I'm not going to label the vessels here and the valves. So we're just going to focus on the circulation of the blood or the blood flow. So let's begin with the blood as it enters the heart. So I'm going to combine the superior and the inferior vena cava as one because it does enter into one um, large vein here. So this is the flow of blood. So of course the blue again, the blue means deoxygenated blood or oxygen poor. You could call it oxygen poor or CO2 rich blood. So it is going to enter the right atrium through this tricuspid valve and into the right ventricle. Once in the right ventricle, it's going to go into the pulmonary artery. So it's still oxygen poor. So from the right ventricle, it goes straight into the lungs. So I'm going to draw this here. I'm going to put so from the right ventricle, it goes into the lungs. So I'm going to label this the lungs. So as it enters the lungs, the oxygen is going to be picked up by the red blood cells, and it is now going to enter the heart through the left atrium. So this is now the oxygenated blood or the oxygen-rich blood, and it is going through the mitral valve and into the left ventricle. Once it is in the left ventricle, it's going to the body cells. So this contains the oxygen-rich blood, and I'm going to draw it right here. So it's going to the rest of the body cells, and it's containing oxygen here. Once the oxygen has been picked up by the cells, it now contains the deoxygenated blood again, and it will have to enter the right atrium, and that is the cycle, and it repeats itself. So again, you have the deoxygenated blood entering the right atrium and into the right ventricle, out of the pulmonary artery into the lungs. So this is still deoxygenated, picks up the oxygen from the lungs. So now you have the oxygen-rich blood, and it goes into the left atrium to the left ventricle. And from the left ventricle, it comes out of the aorta. The air goes this way and into the cells. And the cells will then pick up the oxygen and the nutrients and dump the CO2 or the waste back into the heart so that it can enter this amazing pump and pump that oxygen poor or deoxygenated blood in the right side of the heart into the lungs. That is the blood flow. So we can label this even further. So the blue parts right here, so that's between the heart and the cells, is called the systemic circulation. So the systemic circulation is the circulation of blood between the heart. So from the heart to the Uh, so this would be systemic circulation between the heart to the body cells and the body cells back to the heart. And then you have the ones labeled in red here. This would be called the pulmonary, also known as pulmonic circulation. And this is the circulation of blood between the heart to the lungs and between the lungs and the heart. So that is my simplified diagram of the blood flow. So try making this diagram on your own, and it's pretty simple because it only it shows you the 4 chambers and how the blood enters the heart and what kind of blood is going in and out.